Well, happy Monday morning here on the Markcast. Football is back this week, I guess, according to the NFL, tweeting out the Hall of Fame game kicking off this week, Thursday. But, we've been talking football all the time here on the Markcast. I thought an exciting weekend here. Jason was saying maybe not the most exciting football, but I think we have a ton to talk about, including breaking news here. Jason, how are you doing today?
I'm doing good, Reid. Pretty laid back weekend for me, so got to watch a lot of the football this weekend.
Yeah, we'll get into that as well. Evan, how are you doing?
Good, yeah. Slate of games this weekend wasn't exactly, amazing. I don't really have many notes, so a lot of what you're going to hear today from me is off the top of my head, but excited to talk about it nonetheless.
Well, we'll get into all that here. So first and foremost, and I'm losing my notes here. We have breaking news coming out from friend of the show, Dave Campbell. I had reached out to Dave. I said, "Do you want to come on this week? Are you morning?" He goes, "Well, I got to catch up on some stuff." Well, here we have breaking news coming out. We can talk about this game now or later, but we have Edmonton making a change here, promoting Jarius Jackson to the OC here, getting rid of Magadou. Jason, initial thoughts on this? What do you make?
Oh, they had to do something, right? I think that's the ultimate thing here is that, they're just so hamstrung by that football operations cap that, they couldn't move on from Jones. So, I guess this is almost the best thing they could do in season here. And they just had to do something to, two shutouts in this far into a CFL season. I don't even remember the last time a team's been shut out twice in the same season. I think that would be something interesting to look up. But I think they need to do something. And I think Jarius Jackson brings a little bit of experience to the table. Obviously, he's a Chris Jones guy there as well. But I think at the end of the day, he is a guy that does have some experience being an offensive coordinator in this league. So you don't worry about it from that perspective. But hopefully a new voice will provide a spark for the team.
Yeah, I just can't figure out here. Obviously there's problems with Cornelius, and there's problems with the penalties, and there's problems with Jones. Like, Evan, is this enough? Is this kind of a band-aid here? Like, we have to do something here on the bye week, losing going 0-8.
Oh, definitely. I don't necessarily think this is what Elks fans wanted, but at this point in the season, given where you are, you have to make some sort of change. And if this is what it's going to be, this is probably the best thing that they can do. Jarius Jackson, before this, he was holding both, quarterback coach and pass game coordinator roles. Those always kind of go hand in hand. And it says the Elks just said that he's going to retain his job as quarterback's coach. So this is doubling up too with the OC role. But ultimately, I don't really see this as a very impressive move. Maybe it will help things. I don't know. We're going to have to test it, right? But I think if you ask a lot of Elks fans, this isn't exactly what they wanted to see. We all know what they wanted to see, and that involves Chris Jones, not Jarius Jackson. So, yeah.
Well, and even I saw this week Justin Dunk. I don't know if he's friend of the show yet. We're working on it, but he was on Sports Center. I'm starting the free trade for the hashtag. I said, "Welcome to the party, Evan Willsmore and I. We've been doing the hashtag free trade for it. So excited to see that. I think we'll get into this game. We'll go kind of reverse chronological order here. Overall, Jason, you said you didn't think this was the greatest slate of games this weekend. What did you make overall thoughts of the weekend?
I just think that, the defense is really dominated this week. And I know there's people out there that like defensive football, but honestly, I just prefer when offenses are scoring touchdowns and not field goals, especially the game last night just drove me insane. We'll get into it, but 0 offensive touchdowns. Like, each team had 6 field goals, just not a very watchable game from that perspective. And I thought that the execution from the offenses was way off this week, pretty much from every team.
It looks like here we're having our illustrious CFL.ca stats issues here. All these games in pregame here. Evan, thoughts for the weekend? I know you had your what was it, Leonard Skinner concert as well. Was that more exciting than some of the CFL football?
Yeah, definitely, I think took away from some of the games for me, but I still, got in a bit of, watching, I guess, of the games here and there. Ultimately, like Jason said, definitely more of a defensive weekend. We've become more accustomed in recent weeks to these high-powered offensive games in the CFL that we haven't seen in a long time. But now this week definitely marked a shift, I think, where, teams were scoring less. You saw a lot of scores like in the teens. Things like that. So it was definitely slower. But yeah, if you like defensive football, I think this was a good weekend for you.
So we had the Sunday night game here. We had Calgary at Montreal. I'm, listening through, and I had tweeted out. I was filming. It was I do this filming for an Indian temple here over in Sammamish on the east side, and they host a bunch of like music events and cultural events, and kind of like hey, come enjoy our culture, kind of see what we have going on. And so I'm listening to this is how I listen to the Mariners game, and I was listening to Marshall Ferguson all the way through the rain delay, which I do 100% blame Marshall Ferguson. I think there's something cursed with that gentleman. I just the XFL never had 2 rain delays here this early into the season, but listening through all of that. So I heard the game. I don't know. Was this a good game, Jason? Because I know it came down to the wire, right? And it was close, and we got Paredes kicking, all the kind of stuff. Was this a good game?
Well, hot take. I think this is the worst game that was a one-score game that I think I've ever seen. Like, honestly, like it's very misleading. Came down to like the final play. Calgary still had a chance to get it in the end zone to tie the game on the last play, but ultimately couldn't get it done. But yeah, 0 offensive touchdowns, as I mentioned before in this one. 6 field goals apiece for each team. The only touchdown in this game was a pick 6 in this one. So the execution from both offenses was really sloppy. They both could move the ball a bit, but they just could not punch it in when it came down to it. And honestly, I think that's a big problem in the CFL right now. The red zone execution is very off around the league right now, I think.
Well, I think Edmonton would like to have any sort of red zone involvement. At least these guys can get in there. Because that was the thing here. I mean, Mayor, we see these stat lines, 24, 44, 256. I mean, getting down, it wasn't, I think it was last week. He had like the really high stat line. They were talking with his passing on there. But Evan with this, yeah, because it came down, like not all of these 1-score games are built equal. We saw this a lot in the USFL. Like 98% of our games were decided in the last minute. It's like, yeah, well, but it was, 12-8 or whatever. I don't know. Like, I mean, what did you make of this and the thoughts on Calgary?
Yes, I agree with everything that was said before. Extremely misleading is what I'm going to go on with this one. I mean, yeah, you look at the score and you think, geez, like, kind of a back and forth, like Montreal gets into the 20s, great, whatever, scoring wise. But ultimately, yeah, I mean, offense really struggled in this game. And yeah, I mean, had it not been for that pick 6 on the Montreal side, I mean, you're looking at a potentially, unwatchable game nearly from some aspects. And I just think, yeah, I mean, it's this is really a steep drop off from, again, everything that we've been seeing this game specifically. Now, there were a couple other games like, BC had a nice day on offense against, the Elks of all teams. We'll get into that later. Not looking forward to talking about that one either, but
I am.
Oh, I'm sure you are, Reid, but man, I just feel so bad every week. Anyway, we're not on that yet. Right now, yeah, just looking at, I mean, Montreal, I think the one good thing from this game offensively, and really it comes from either side of the ball. I know Tradeums Dukes had a good game for Calgary. So did Reggie Bagleton receiving. But the one point I really want to talk about here from this game on the offensive side of the ball is William Stanback getting worked in for Montreal. 15 carries for 86 yards, I believe, was averaging, 5.7 yards per carry. Finally, William Stanback in week 8 of the season, 2 months in, is finally getting, his work. And I mean, we've been waiting so long to kind of see him, get going because of, obviously Stanback, I think it was last season that he missed due to injury, or he missed a large chunk of that. And then he hasn't really, I mean, I remember in 2021, him being one of the better backs in the league. So I was kind of excited to see that this year, but we haven't seen it really until now. He's finally, starting to get some reps, and he did have a game. I remember, I forget which week it is, but he had a couple catches. He was getting worked in on that side of the offense, but to see him, get into this stride again as a pure runner, I think that's really good to see, and I think that really is going to benefit Montreal moving forward a ton if he can, carry the rock like that, especially because Cody Fajardo did not have the best day passing here too.
Yeah, it was like the Marquez curse last year, because I think I had Stanback on preseason, and he was doing he was in Georgia or something, and he was like, I've been working out here on the street with my boys and the lift. I'm like, this guy's gonna come in and go. We're doing a lot of Alouettes interviews. Yeah, and they came in. Wasn't it that first game, Jason, that Stanback got hurt last year?
Yep, and then he came back for the last month of the season, and yeah, like Evan said, didn't look the same until we saw that yesterday.
I have some hot take tweets here. First off, you might know this gentleman, Hussey, talking here. One of the worst goal to go sequences I've ever seen. 5-yard penalty. Lots of just bizarre kind of play calling, everything. Ryan here checking in, too many men, followed by a time count violation. What is Calgary's kind of I don't have a beat on what they want to be as a team right now.
Yeah, I don't know what's going on with them either. I think that it's very uncharacteristic of them, the mistakes that they're making. I mean, they just look confused on offense. They look like they have no composure. I think that, like you said, the goal to go sequence was what drove me insane in this game. But there are also several moments where they were kind of late coming out of the huddle and, they take a time count violation or very close to taking a time count violation. A lot of guys standing around not looking to know what the play is. So I think that's just uncharacteristic of what we've seen from the Stampeders over the last 10 to 15 years, really. So I think that this is very new. And I think that, the Stampeders started 2-5 in 2021, I do believe. And then they ultimately ended up 8-6. But I think this is a different feel for this team. They don't seem like they have that veteran core leadership that they've had in recent years to really rebound from this. So it's not going to get easier with them having a tough schedule up ahead.
Yeah, talking about that, and we can look at the schedule here coming up. Yeah, because I can't remember who was tweeting out. They're seeing Toronto twice and BC in there. Evan, I have the last play here. Let me get this up. I have the last play of the game queued up here, and there was sound, with Mayer. I want to talk about as well on here. But should Mayer have run for it here, gotten the first down that we're throwing long into the end zone? It seems like he kind of he misjudged here, whatever. Not a great decision. What do you make of Mayer's thoughts here on the final drive?
Yeah, I mean, on that play specifically, I definitely think he could have run a bit more, before at least throwing it. Obviously, line of scrimmage, whatever. But I think ultimately, I see that as more of a play where you need to, because if you look, I mean, right there, he's throwing it, guy's not even open. This is like a live reaction right here, pretty much. But no, I mean, I think he could have definitely run there. And, I think Jake Mayer, I want to say, he had 44 pass attempts in this game. So again, one of these days where I think they're throwing the ball a bit too much and, being a bit too excessive in that department. And he only completed 24 of, those 44 passes. So, ultimately, again, I think I brought it up last week, but these quarterbacks that, are throwing over 40 passes and, not throwing any touchdowns, it doesn't even really matter at that point, your completion percentage. I mean, if you're not scoring that way, you're going to lose the game. And in this case, that's what happened. Now, on the other side of the ball, Cody Fajardo was 16 of 29, so not exactly much better, but at least they were a bit more efficient in the fact that, Fajardo's arm wasn't falling off by the end of the game, if you know what I mean.
Yeah, he hit his hand too. I heard them talk a lot about that going into half. Jason, does he seem fine? I could hear because I was listening to the game. Apologies, not one, but they were speaking of him kind of like waving his hand off. Is Fajardo going to be all right here? Have we seen anything about that?
Well, I think it's definitely something to monitor going forward because it looked like after that happened, every time he had to push the ball down the field at all, he came up favoring that forearm. So I think that is definitely something to watch this week. And if it hinders him at all going forward, obviously he had that injury last year that lingered for him. So, hopefully he can stay healthy because he's looked very healthy so far this season. And I've been really impressed with his overall body of work this year. Not the best game in this one, but ultimately didn't need to with the way their defense was playing.
Jason, do you think Mayer, do you think this was the right decision here?
No, I think that Mayer should have taken off and run with it. But I will say that, as I said, I was communicating with Marty York on Twitter last night, and he was saying that that he's not a very mobile quarterback. But, I think the biggest problem with him is, yes, he's not a great athlete, but he doesn't take off and run when he has those easy opportunities. The defense, naturally, if you're not a very athletic quarterback, is going to dare you to take those opportunities. And he's had several opportunities this year where he could have just taken off and ran instead of forcing a short throw that ultimately ends up incomplete anyway. I think that he passes that up way too often, including that last play of the game.
You see, I have the tweet here queued up. That's what you call producing. Queued up on here. No, like Marianne, I want to say I like, and I'm not going to play the sound, but I had here, and they were talking with Mayer after the game, and I do at least like how he kind of carries himself, and we've gone back and forth with Cody, but last year, when they were struggling, we had a lot of Cody, and well, I need better receivers and I'm having all these issues. And it was even 2 years ago, I think Paul and I had like, is Cody Fajardo the man in black? Like he kind of heel turn Cody, where Mayer's like, it's on me, gave the team a lot of credit. They played us well. They were obviously prepared for what we were going to do. But like, I feel like he at least is saying the right things. I don't know if that always is going to translate him off the field, but at least from like a commentator and a fan aspect, like I feel, okay as like a Calgary fan, at least with kind of Mayer's handling that. Evan, any other thoughts on the game? Mayor, Cody, anything? I have a couple other tweets I can pull up too.
Yeah, I mean, I will say, just going off what Jason said, I don't think Jake Mayer is necessarily the most mobile quarterback either. But, like what exactly? Like when you're, when the offense opens up and you have an opportunity to run, you're going to take that. Really like Tom Brady did that many times, in his career, and he wasn't necessarily a mobile quarterback. He can at least scramble for a couple yards here and there. And in that case, I mean, they're at the 10-yard line. I mean, I think Jake Mayer, if he really needed to, could run for 10 yards if it meant he was going to, have an opportunity to, win or tie the football game. So, yeah, I mean, that's ultimately where I sit on it.
I had a couple of tweets here. First, I guess we can do into these. So Bob Irving tweeting out, Calgary Stampeders haven't had a losing record since 2007. They're 2-5 after their 25-18 loss to Montreal. And then we have a friend of me, the show here, Arash. And this is always interesting to me, and I want to get Jason's thoughts because obviously we're coming into this kind of with all the XFL stuff. I've been saying this since the CFL returned in 2021. The Stamps are just a reputation team taken seriously because of 2018 and prior, not of what they are now. The reality, Calgary's been poor for a while, 3 straight seasons without playoff wins, and this bunch looks lost. Jason, reactions to that?
Yeah, I think I'm one of those people that fell victim to this whole idea of believing in the reputation of this team. And I think that is what allowed me to pick them to finish second in the West before the season started. But I think ultimately, when you look at the big picture, yes, they have been declining over the last few years. They had a pretty good season last year, but when you looked at how they played against the best teams in the CFL, particularly over the past 3 years, like Madani says, they've really struggled and they just cannot find the plays that they need in these big time games. Like I said, they have no composure, which is a far cry from what they were 2018 and before, like Madani said.
Yeah, let's check it in. You really thought Calgary is going to be taking a lot better this season. Their record reflects. Evan, did you have something to say?
I mean, look, Calgary, the reality is I think a lot of people are sitting here and they're surprised about the way Calgary has been performing. Me personally, I think there has been a definite shift since, the team returned from COVID. And even before that, they won the Grey Cup in 2018. So, over the past, I think 5 years, there's already, been a shift towards, I guess we could use the term rebuild, maybe, right? Like you're bringing in, like it's the end of an era, right? Like the, consistent playoff appearances and things like that. This might be the year where it officially ends. I mean, we're looking at 2-5 right now. Yeah, like Jason said, they started 2-5 in 2021. They turned things around, but that was a shorter season, and I just don't get the same vibe right now. Again, they don't have the same personnel. 2 years is a long time ago in football, so I'm interested to see where Calgary goes for sure. I do think this team has potential. Every time I watch this team, it's less about. I mean, it's a completely different situation than say. I mean, oh God, Edmonton. I hate bringing this up again, but I at least look at Calgary and I'm like, okay, they have some pieces, they have the right idea. It just hasn't all come together. So I could see this version of the team. Yeah, maybe no playoffs this year, but give them another 2 or 3 years. I mean, I do see Jake Mayer still as a starting quarterback in this league for many years to come, and somebody that can lead this team. I have a lot more belief in him than say somebody like Taylor Cornelius. Now, maybe that goes without saying. I don't know, but. I think ultimately Calgary's outlook is one that will definitely need to be monitored, but I think it's also one, it really shouldn't come as a surprise. I think this has been something, that has been pending now for a couple years, and we'll see where they go, right? I mean, there's a lot of ways this could branch out as the season goes on. We're going on to week 9 of a 21-week season, so we're not even halfway. But yeah, interesting discussion for sure.
Any other thoughts? I just want to shout out Jenna checking in here in the chat as well. Jenna's been absent on social media, so I'm glad to see Jenna's back. Hope she's doing good. Coach Craig checking in. Jason, anything else from this? We'll get to the obviously the game of the weekend here, but any other thoughts on this?
Yeah, so one thing I wanted to say is that Calgary is far from out of it. I mean, Saskatchewan's doing everything possible to leave the door open for that third spot in the West. So, I mean, Calgary definitely just needs to string a couple of wins together. But at this point, I'm losing hope for them.
All right, so let's get in here. I guess this is a good way to start off. I had this little tweet I was proud of. I said, "This is Luis Purefoy watching is all of us watching the Go Elks this season." And this is when they were getting like the DPI against, I think it was Whitehead near the end of the game. This tremendous game here. I have many reactionary tweets about this. We'll toss it first, I guess, to Evan, just because Jason just spoke. Second shutout here, BC of Edmonton. We talked obviously the new OC at the top of the show. Thoughts here on this game?
I mean, again, I think, every week I'm like, how low can we go? How low can we set the bar on a weekly basis? And I want to say we've hit the lowest of lows now with the second shutout. And, I don't know, but like something tells me next week, something worse will happen. It's one of those things where, you have to see it to believe it. You have to watch the Elks to really understand, what this season has been for them. And it really is just a disaster. Again, I've tried to be reserved around this subject, for the course of the season. But now it's at a point where, I mean, you look at not even just Elks fans, but, anyone that looks at the CFL as a whole, whether it's just fans in general, media, I think there is a level of, criticalness or whatever, surrounding this team, just because I think people expected at least some improvement by this point. You at least win a game, you at least score some points. That, I mean, it's like this team just doesn't try. And I'm not saying like there's, not people on that team, who care, because there is a lot of people who care. And there's a lot of people on that team who I know are frustrated. Again, it's a difficult sport, difficult business, whatever. But I mean, come on, man. Like, again, like every week, well, that they've been at home, they've had an opportunity to break this streak and at least get a bit of momentum going. But each time it becomes something worse. It's like, well, not only did you, lose this game to set, the all-time record or whatever it is, in, pro sports history for home losses, you did it by being shut out for the second time in the season by the same team that had shut you out before. Like, it's just, I mean, how many times, like, it's how many things can happen before I can just sit here and just laugh and not say anything. And that's really sad more than it is funny. But it's just the reality. I mean, I can't wait to see what this team does in the offseason. I mean, I think, they've just had the OC switch, but in my opinion, that's really minor in the grand scheme of things. I really want to see, the direction of this team, once the season is officially over. I mean, we've already talked about, like, again, they're kind of stuck, where they are now with what they have. And I mean, it's very, again, disheartening. I can only use so many of these negative terms, saddening terms, but disheartening, because in week 1 or week 2, I was saying, well, the Elks are already, this is already a rebuilding year, and for a team to be saying that, not even a month into the season, it is like you're already waving the white flag. You've given up, and there's been no change in that philosophy really through 2 months. I mean, we just, wrapped up with week 8, and I have seen no improvement from Edmonton in really any aspect of the game. I do like their defense, I think, a bit more. Not that they really played well this game, giving up 27 points, but like AC Leonard, a couple of those guys. Again, like there are pieces on this team, and I have discussed that before. Try and find the positives in this terrible situation. But ultimately, I think the Elks at this point, it's just like, now it's like, I don't even care at this point if they win at home. I just want them to win a game to just save them from it, like some of this despair. Like, it has to stop. I mean, it's like, well, what's the phrase they use? It's like, don't, poke the bear when it's already dead or whatever. I mean, that's what this feels like.
Yeah, I got Jed Roberts here, friend of the show. Rock bottom is beyond even this. The Elks are flirting with disaster. Defense may win championships, but offense sells tickets. 0 points scored equals no fans, and no fans equals no money. No money, gate-driven league equals no team. Dangerous game of chicken. I think it's interesting, and we'll go to Jason here. Like, we talk these losing streaks. Like losing 19 games at home in a row of basketball is a little different than 4 years here of football of losing, since 2019. Like that, these aren't all all equal in terms of like, games played and home games and all that. What do you make of this? Really kind of a disaster.
It just defies belief at this point. I mean, I just cannot understand how it's gone on for this long and how they have not won a home game under the new name. And it's just, I mean, like I said earlier this year, I think it's starting to feel like a legitimate curse. And I'm not like an overly spiritual person, but like it really starts to feel like there's something wrong with this. I feel like there's just some kind of curse over this organization, some kind of dark cloud. And I think for everything that they do, it's one step forward and two steps back. Every time they have something positive happen within a game, they make a couple of more mistakes to dig themselves a bigger hole. And I think, the quarterback play is a big culprit of it. Obviously, getting that position right will be a priority going forward for this team. And it's going to be interesting, like Evan said, to see what they do in the offseason with that. But I think in terms of what they're going to do the rest of the season, I mean, like, I just don't see any hope for this team. Even if they do put Trey Ford out there, I think that it would be more exciting. I think it would be more interesting to watch. But I think that ultimately, I don't know if they're going to win a game with him either. So it's going to be interesting to see them play the rest of the season. And I think I'm going to do a video on this week, rank the teams that I enjoy watching in the CFL. And Edmonton would be an easy last right now. I mean, it's been a long season. I really don't look forward to watching their games each week.
Yeah, the interesting you were saying that because they kind of do it both ways, where the penalties and I don't know. I mean, Dane played good, right? And what was his? He was like, 25 or 32. Like he played good, played clean, but like even the BC, their defense, they give up. Cornelius got that one huge long shot near the end of the game, right? It was like a couple of minutes left, and then he immediately gets an interception, and they're like, the defense, like it bends, it doesn't break. Like, oh, okay, like we got beat that one play. Like, okay, now we're going to come back. Like now we're kind of really angry on that. I want to talk about I have the tweet here, and this, I didn't know that this was a thing, and I saw this yesterday. The Donut Boys, calling the defense the Donut Boys because they're putting up O's. And I thought that is tremendous. And Rick co-signed it. He said he's okay with them calling it that. Jason, do we like the Donut Boys? I said this is what the CFL needs. It's like, the steel curtain or whatever, like the NFL. Like, do you like the Donut Boys?
Yeah, I mean, I think you can call yourselves whatever you want when you have two shutouts in the CFL. I mean, that's pretty hard to do defensively. I mean, I'll be really, really impressed if they do it against someone other than Edmonton. But two shutouts in one CFL season, that's pretty impressive.
Yeah, we had Terry Jones here getting shut out 27-0 the CFL's virtually impossible. Getting shut out in this league twice by the BC Lions in the same season and set the North American pro sports record with 21 consecutive losses. Fire the GM, head coach, OC, release the quarterback. Something has to happen. Yeah, we talked about that. I don't know if doing the OC is kind of enough to do all that. Like I said, we got Dave here talking rock bottom, embarrassing. Evan, positives here from BC. How did our boy Dane look?
Oh, yeah. Well, there were plenty of positives on the BC end. I mean, yeah, starting with the Donut Boys. I do think that nickname is earned. I think, pitching two shutouts in a league like this, you definitely deserve a nickname. And again, hopefully they can do that again. I'm really interested to see, what BC's defense can do over the course of the rest of the season. Are they going to pitch another shutout? Yeah, hard to say. I don't know about that one, but I mean, you never know. Like, I think they definitely have the capability to do it, the personnel. But yeah, going back to, Dane Evans and that offense, Dane had a great game. This was one of the better games I've seen from Dane Evans in a long time. And that goes back, all the way to Hamilton when he was starting there. I was very impressed. And this, to me, like, again, I think I brought it up last week or the week before, Vernon should keep his job when he gets back. But, to have a guy like that, just ready to go all the time, it really is, valuable. And this has been proven here, even if it's against, an opponent that, maybe isn't exactly of the strongest variety. But anyway, no, I mean, look, Dane Evans is definitely finding his stride here, in place of Vernon. And it's good to see him, get some reps in this season because, to be honest, like if Vernon doesn't get hurt, I mean, he was, playing so well. I don't know, Dane might have just been sitting there hanging out with the clipboard. But all love for Dane, great game from him. I was really impressed with Taquan Mizell in this game, however you say it. Really had a nice. I mean, this was, we had sung his praises back a couple weeks ago, but I think he's been injured He hasn't really played. I mean, I
Yeah,
might
they
have
had
a mistake on
Shivers
that.
in was like,
Yeah,
was
it
it
was
2 weeks,
Shivers
right?
for a
Yeah,
while.
Shivers was in a couple weeks, yeah.
Right, right. So it was Shivers in, and he did a good job too. But Taquan was always kind of the guy that I was hoping would break out, and this was, I think, somewhat of a breakout game. 117 rushing yards, had a receiving touchdown on 2 catches for 30 yards. All around a great game from him. And then, I mean, do I even need to say anything about the receivers at this point? I mean, I feel like every week we're just talking about, how strong that receiving core is. And it just speaks for itself, the production. Not only the production, but again, spreading the ball around to different guys. I mean, everybody gets, 4, 5, 6 catches. You don't have one receiver that ends up, catching 10 balls in the game. I think that is one of the best things you could see in football right there. That little, receiving box score. That is extremely impressive. And again, they do this week after week. Why do you think this offense has been, so successful over the course of these 2 months? Because they just have so many playmakers, and it's obviously going to be hard to retain all those guys going into next year. They're definitely going to lose some in free agency, but right now I don't think that's a concern because again, and maybe I've said this before too, I do think BC has the personnel to make a Grey Cup run this time around.
Well, that's what I wanted to talk with Jason about, and I had my notes, and I had some funny things I wanted to pull up too here. But like, we look at the depth that BC has, and I've been watching the Kraken a lot, right, in the last year and the offseason, the kind of depth building and looking at the minor league and how deep's our roster. And like the Kraken always kind of had a different roster where they didn't have a lot of superstars this year. Like BC has all these huge names. Last year, right, we got Nathan Rourke. He's on this penny deal. We're able to re-sign Lucky. We're able to bring on Keon, kind of all this stuff. Here now, we get VA. We have such like this backup here. Like Dominique Rhymes has been out. Lucky's been out. Keon, like all these guys, McGinnis is stepping up. Mizell's even taking passes, like that's why they wanted, I guess, bring him back versus Shivers because he could catch as a running back. Like, Vernon goes down. We have Dane Evans. Like the depth that this team has, I just can't figure out, like, is that just Neil McAvoy credit? Like, what do you attribute it to that BC, like, it seems to have no lack of depth here, kind of in any position, and where all these other teams just seem to be like Edmonton can't get a quarterback. Here we have 2 quarterbacks that are playing phenomenally well right now.
Yeah, I think you got to give a lot of credit to Neil McAvoy, the GM. I think he was very proactive in bringing in Dane Evans. I think that was such a good move this offseason. Even bringing in Dominic Davis as the third string guy, I think he's an excellent short yardage quarterback. That quarterback room is just so solid all around. And then, I mean, any quarterback could succeed with the wide receivers they have. I mean, the offensive line, I think, has shown a lot of improvement over the last couple of years. And I think that's allowed them to be a pretty good team as well, because it was just a disaster a couple of years ago. But I think that's probably still the weakness on that offense, but it's no longer a huge deficiency. And then, I mean, they just have depth, like you said, all throughout the defense. I think defensive line, they rotate heavily. And I think that in this game, Ryan Phillips, the defensive coordinator, who I think is going to be head coach in the CFL next year, he was really just toying with the Edmonton Elks offense. I think they were just dialing up blitz after blitz, and Cornelius had no answer for him.
It does feel that way. It feels like, and I think it was last year, and they're talking like their wide receiver by committee, like they don't care, like no one needs to be, which is big words when you have like all these former NFL guys coming up, right? Like I think that says a lot. Like the Lucky is like, I don't care, like I don't need to be the star here. He kind of does his own thing. But yeah, the defense and kind of the where it's been kind of 3 years now of us covering this team and covering the league and seeing them, and Brian Phillips, and where he was like the co-defensive, whatever it was, and then getting promoted here and building up. And it does feel like they're poised right now. I mean, I thought last year with Rourke, and we kind of saw everything fall apart without him, but it does feel like expectations are pretty high right now. I don't, our tickets are booked already to Hamilton, but it does feel like BC, this game this Thursday is, I think, going to be a real testament to see if they can do the Winnipeg again. Evan, thoughts on that? And I got some other funny stuff I want to pull up.
Yeah, I mean, right now, I see them. I mean, if there's a West final between them and Winnipeg, I personally see right now BC taking that in the revenge game. And, I think, I mean, it was just so, I mean, you talk about Ryan Phillips, like, I personally, I mean, we don't really talk about many coaches on this show, but I've really enjoyed, watching him and seeing what he's done. Personally, I mean, look, I'm not going to start making like connections here, but let's say, well, I would imagine that the Elks move on from Chris Jones in the offseason. And if you're going to do that, or at least maybe, take Chris Jones away from a certain role, give him one hat to wear as opposed to three, then maybe you bring in a younger guy like Ryan Phillips, who used to play in the CFL. Ryan Phillips, bring him in, kind of a younger, guy with a different mentality, different philosophy. Because personally, I definitely see him as a head coaching candidate for sure for 2024.
I had a couple other funny things here. We were talking the salary cap and all of that. I said, let's fix the salary cap issue for coaching staff before we add a temp team. Like, let's put the cart before the horse here. And then I did think this was funny because I kind of thought about this. They were talking on the broadcast how Jones took the whole team to go see Mission Impossible. And I thought, well, that's like, I don't want to poo-poo on that because, like, well, okay, let them have a little bit of levity here. They're living through all this. But I thought they could have went and seen Barbie or Oppenheimer, and they chose to go see Mission Impossible. So I said, if you want everything you need to know about the Elks' historic losing streak, I did notice, I don't know if you guys did, I put, obviously fog jerseys, fire, BC. I'm like, God, those jerseys just look really good. But if you guys notice, Jones, he's normally been wearing that really high button polo, right? It's kind of a look, right? I got my thing up, and he was in like a quarter zip. And to me, I'm like, that's Juju as well. He's sitting there. He's like, we haven't won this season. I'm switching up my outfit. I don't know if you guys saw any of that, but I do think 139 penalty yards by the Elks at half. Kate Burness, it was even so high that she didn't even have it calculated correctly. And then they were talking at the end of the broadcast, you have to go to Trey 4. It can't be any worse than 4-23. It's insane on that. Jason, any other thoughts on this? We'll get to the touchdown Atlantic.
No, I think I'm pretty tired about talking about the Elks for this week. So let's go on.
All right, so this was the game I probably have the least amount of notes on, so hopefully Jason's got a little bit on that. We had the touchdown Atlantic here. What did we make of this? I guess we'll start. I'll go back to Jason. I'm watching. I'm filming the wedding at this time. I'm watching the notifications on my phone come up. I'm like, oh, this feels like a very safe game for Toronto. Was this ever really in doubt?
No, not really at all. And I think that, to add on to what I said earlier, I think the offenses just didn't look very good in this one. This is the first time that Chad Kelly kind of got, he kind of struggled a little bit. I think he threw for like 122 yards, and he really didn't have to do much. I think the big turning point in this one was really early in the game when Javon Leak had a punt return touchdown for Toronto, and that was really all they needed. Saskatchewan just once again could not get into the end zone with Mason Fine at quarterback, and then he gets hurt late in the game, and then Jake Dolegala comes in, and when garbage time was in there, and led them for a touchdown drive there, and finally got in the end zone. So I mean, just a disappointing game for Saskatchewan. And I think they're honestly one of the toughest watches right now in the CFL. I mean, right up there, not close to the Edmonton, but I think they're probably the second least watchable team in the CFL right now, just based on how their quarterback play has looked post Trevor Harris here. And I think at the end of the day, Toronto just once again looks like the best team in the CFL. I mean, when your offense plays like crap, honestly, and you still win 31-13, I think that's still pretty good.
Yeah, this is another team like Calgary. Like, I just don't really kind of know what their identity is. And we've talked, and Mason Fine, and I have the quote here from where's Dickinson here talking like, I feel like Mason played enough to continue to start. 27-39 for 302, but obviously with the 2 picks in there and no interceptions. Like, I just don't know if you're Saskatchewan here coming off of last year. I don't know what you do here. Evan, do you have thoughts on Saskatchewan or Toronto?
Yeah, I mean, I'll start with the Saskatchewan side first, then I'll get to Toronto. They're definitely at an interesting point, right? Mason Fine, like, is he the quarterback to take over? Because personally, like, he had another kind of weird game where, he was close to, throwing 40 passes and still had a ton of yards, but no touchdowns. Turnovers were a problem. So I just don't really know what to make of this so far. And then you have Jake Dolegala, who comes in, someone I had kind of written off, not someone I had really thought about. He comes in and he actually looks pretty impressive, I mean, compared to what Mason Fine did. So, maybe like Jake Dolegala gets more reps moving forward. I think Craig said, you got the tweet pulled up here. What am I saying? He said that Fine will remain the starter, but he wanted to put Jake in because the game was out of reach by that point. I don't know. Personally, I would like to see more of Jake after that. Again, not someone I'd really thought about immediately, but yeah, he comes in and, probably, just exceeds Mason Fine really in that time. He completed 4 passes to Mason's 27, but was so much more efficient and actually got a touchdown out of it that you kind of have to, point that out. Once again, it's very similar to last week. Sean Bain and Tevin Jones, great, receiving duo there. They had a phenomenal day there, catching the football, but no run game. Still, Jamal Moore was a tiny bit better, but everyone else, they're barely, they're just over 50 rushing yards. It's not great. And that's been a problem. I think that's what's really limiting this team's ability on offense. You're asking, again, the more you throw, with a quarterback who maybe doesn't have as much experience, this is the result. If you can't run the football, you're still not going to score many points in this specific situation. So, yeah, Saskatchewan, it's just hard right now. I don't know what to really make of them either. They're kind of at this impasse, sort of like Calgary is. Again, they're much farther ahead of a team like Edmonton. I think that goes without saying at this point. But, Saskatchewan and Calgary are really these two teams. It's like, okay, who's going to start, winning and really pulling away from the other? Right now it's still hard to tell. But then on the Toronto side, this wasn't exactly a traditional game for the Argonauts either. Chad Kelly really slowed down, and really slowed down from what it's been before. 122 yards, 1 touchdown, 1 interception. He had probably one of the, more poor, I think, quarterback performances, across the CFL this week. Maybe not. Again, if you threw a touchdown, I think you get bonus points. But no, maybe I'm being a bit too harsh, but still, ultimately, Chad really didn't have to do a lot, and I think Jason already brought that up. His offense, compared to a situation like Mason Fine's, did more of the work for him. They had a better ground game. The receivers, they didn't really have to, just go directly to 1 or 2 guys. Cam Phillips in this one, was the top target, but I think, DeVaris Daniels and even AJ Ouellette, the running back, getting worked in there were equally as important. But yeah, ultimately, I just think it goes to show Toronto is more of a complete team. And hell, Chad Kelly threw for 122 yards and turned the ball over, and they still scored 31 points. And I think a large part of that was because, their defense was highly successful in this game, just allowing, the offense to go with such ease. Wynton McManus, had one of the better defensive games for the Argos that I've seen really from a lot of defensive players this season across the CFL. So, wanted to give him a shout out there. And then, a couple other guys, Quantez Stiggers, the guy that we had talked about, so much coming from, FCF, and he's kind of having a, I don't want to say breakout season, but he's definitely had, a bit of a hot start, more impressive than I would have imagined for, a guy jumping up to this level so immediately. But yeah, ultimately all around, just a great day, I think, for Toronto. And more importantly, I just personally, I really like the Touchdown Atlantic series. I'm glad that it's kind of back, and it seems like it'll be, here to stay. At least, I don't know for how long, but I did an article on that Touchdown Atlantic stuff probably a little over a year ago. And I talked about, every time someone brings up Touchdown Atlantic, it's automatically brought into expansion talks, right? Because they want, the 10th team has been connected to Halifax for so long. I don't know. You could say that they're, testing the venues and things like that. But ultimately, every time they play this Touchdown Atlantic series, I think it's a pretty good turnout. Clearly there is a hunger for football there. And look, I don't know, how many fans in those stands are actually from Nova Scotia, or if it's just people, flying in from Toronto or whatever. Again, not that I had that stat, but if, we did have that, maybe I would be saying different things. But ultimately, yeah, look, I really like the series. I hope it sticks around. And ultimately, I hope that, as much of a complex discussion as it is, and maybe it's not something we should be worrying about right now. Whenever you're talking about Halifax and Touchdown Atlantic, that 10th team is always going to come to mind.
Yeah, we got here the sign. Best sign, best sign for the whatever. Halifax wants you, and I go back to this. Let's fix it. Jason, what do you make of the Argos' poor performance? I saw a tweet put out they flew in the night before, and I guess a lot of the teams usually go out there the week of. Do you blame jet lag on this? What do you blame their sluggish game?
Well, I just think it was bound to happen. I think that you can't be firing on all cylinders every week of the season. I think Toronto up until this week was firing on all cylinders every week so far this season. So I think at the end of the day, one of these stinker games was bound to happen, and good thing for them. Their defense really showed up. I wanted to highlight some players on defense for them. Sean Oakman and Forlarin Oromalade. What an inside-outside pass rush duo. Those guys are going to wreak havoc. If they're going to stay healthy the rest of the season, they're going to be a dominant force for this team going forward. And I thought the secondaries really gave the Rough Riders receivers really no space to work with in this one. Deshaun Amos obviously had the pick six. Stiggers, like Evan mentioned. Royce Mechie had a big fumble that he forced at the goal line when Jamal Morrow tried to reach out for the goal line. And I thought that was a huge play in this game where Saskatchewan still could have climbed back into it. And then Roberson Daniel also had an interception in this one. He's had 4 interceptions so far this season. So I think Toronto's defense played excellent. And I think this is a true team that's playing complementary football in all phases. Their punting is really excellent. Josh Haggerty is an excellent punter for them. And I think that was another strong suit of them in this game. And I think at the end of the day, just a great effort from Toronto.
Yeah, what do we got here coming up here? We're in the pregame next week. Toronto at Calgary. I think this is when they were talking about kind of the Calgary's rough schedule here coming up. That seems like a tough game here. We'll talk Montreal, Hamilton, and all of that. But yeah, Toronto here cruising. I was so confused, and I've never been more confused in my life when I was getting ready to watch the Ottawa Hamilton game, right? And they had the rain delay on there, and they're like cutting to the panel, and the panel's like on the field. I'm like, what is happening? And I'm like, oh, they're at the I was like just had it up on my phone. I'm like, oh, they're at the Touchdown Atlantic. Because I'm like, wait, how are they? Like, what is happening here? Why is the panel in Ottawa, wherever it was? So very confused about that. A couple of just funny comments here at Scott checking in. The Elks season is Mission Impossible. And then Chris has this one: to win one game is Mission Impossible. So I thought that was funny. Anything else on this one? We'll do welfare check on Jason here with the Ticats. Anything else from this one, guys? All right, so I feel bad. I probably should have checked in at the beginning here. Jason, how are you feeling here? This was rough. A win is a win, but it's like Thanos. So what did it cost? It costed a whole lot here. What did you make of the Bo Levi Mitchell of it all here with the Hamilton game?
Well, I mean, it's just so unfortunate that he gets injured right at the end of this game. I mean, the first game back, I mean, there's questions about whether this Bo Levi should have even been playing in this game, given that they took him off the 6-game injured list a game early. So they don't even get cap savings from that, if I'm remembering how the rules remember correctly. But I think at the end of the day, it was just an ugly win for the Ticats. It was good to see them get back to playing Tiger Cats football in terms of playing well defensively, really kept Dustin Crum contained basically the entire game and really kept them out of the end zone the entire game. So I think that was good to see from that perspective. But on offense, when Bo was in there, 5 interceptions, some of them his fault, some of them not. And then obviously just hate to see that at the end of the game. Just a bizarre coaching decision to have him in there at that point. I know it was on the 2-yard line, so maybe you do want to, plunge forward in that situation, make sure you don't give up the safety. But even then, they were up by 4 points. So I don't think a safety would have cost them the game even. So I think at the end of the day, any point in the game, you wouldn't have had Bo Levi running that play. And I think that, I saw a report that maybe it was Bo Levi that went ahead and said that he was going to go and plunge forward on that one. But regardless, I mean, as a coaching staff, you should not have allowed him to do that regardless. And it shouldn't have even been a possibility for that to happen. So just really unfortunate and just a nightmare season for Bo Levi.
Yeah, Evan, this is I don't get because Bo comes back early. We've said all this, and if Bo comes back, is that going to be the savior? Comes back, throws 5 interceptions, and so it wasn't even and I know coming back off injury and all that, but it wasn't, it was a second worst performance of the season compared to our boy Vernon Adams here with against the Argonauts. But comes back, throws 5 picks, and then it's hurt again. What would you do here? What are your thoughts?
I mean, it's just really sad, again, and we've talked about it before, just, how I mean, it's been a bit of a downfall here for Bo Levi in Hamilton, not just because of the injuries, but like when he does play. I mean, in this game, he wasn't exactly spectacular, and it's just like if this is the way like that he's going to go out of the CFL. I mean, that's just really disappointing. And I'm not saying, I mean, he could come back for another year, give it another shot, but when you're hindered by injuries at this age and things just aren't going your way, it's so hard to, I think, find and regain confidence that you can keep doing this. And ultimately, I mean, this was just really, it's a shame because we had, I mean, well, I don't know, you talk to somebody like Andy Murray. I mean, he was already saying, oh, Bo's not going to do it in Hamilton. And me personally, I mean, I didn't think he was going to be like one of the top quarterbacks in the league, but I certainly thought it would be better than, whatever this has been. Just ultimately, a very disappointing season for Bo Levi. And I wish him the best, really. I mean, I hope he can get off this 6-game injured list in whatever week and come back and finish the season strong. But, who knows where the team is by that point. I mean, right now, I think they're 3-4. But, right, like looks like what's going to happen is Taylor Powell is going to come back in, maybe Matt Schultz fills in later on, depending on how Powell plays or what that situation looks like. I mean, right now we don't even know, when Bo Levi is really coming back. To me, it looked like more, I mean, I thought it was, when I saw it initially, to me, it looked like he was going to be out for the season. And it's the same situation in Saskatchewan with Trevor Harris. Like, Rough Riders are saying there's a chance he comes back in the final few weeks, but I don't know. I mean, maybe with Bo Levi, like if they put him on the 6th game, that really does say something. But like he could easily come back off the 6th game again and just get injured, and we're right back, and then that would be ultimately the end of his season. So I don't know. It's a tough scenes over there, is what I'll say. And I mean, fortunately, now look, Hamilton's quarterback depth ultimately, I think, has been good considering they've had to play, 3 guys, whatever, Bo Levi, Schultz, Powell. I mean, Schultz and Powell have actually shown a lot of promise, when they've appeared. And of course, it was unfortunate to see Schultz go down too. And now I believe they have Antonio Pipkin behind Taylor Powell moving forward. So we'll see. It's ultimately, it's just one of these things that, I wish we could avoid it. There's been so many quarterback injuries in the league this season, but just bad luck and bad timing. And I mean, the whole, I think, whether or not he should have been in the game, that's a whole different discussion. I'm not going to touch on that because I see it happen too many times. It really is a complex issue, because it comes down to is it the coaching staff or the player? And like, was it really that big of a deal in the moment? I don't know. There's just too much around that. If I start talking about that, we're going to go well over our time. So.
Yeah, they had and I had the quote from Naylor as well. Like, he always worries about, getting in there, with the, so, someone getting injured here when it's running that. I did have this tweet. I felt bad for against us. I said, Will Levi Mitchell, so it's 5 interceptions. He gets injured in the garbage time. Ticats win anyway. We have a question here. Matt Chatter wants to know, how did Crum look? The end of Crum sanity here. Jason, how did Dustin Crum look?
Well, I think he still made his fair share of impressive plays. I think that it looked like on that final drive, he was going to lead them to the promised land and yet again with another dramatic victory, but just cannot close in the red zone. And I think overall, they were the better team offensively in this game. Hamilton had a lot of yards, but I think that a lot of that came on a few plays. And I think Ottawa, the big problem with them is they're not getting anything down the field at this point. They have to be so methodical with their offense, kind of like Calgary. We've talked about how they're, not taking any shots down the field. Ottawa just hasn't been able to hit those big explosive plays, and that's forced them to really drive the field methodically, and they get drives that stall out in the red zone. And I think that's been their big problem for this game specifically. They hadn't really had that problem in the games against Calgary or Winnipeg. But I think that another issue here is that Hamilton has dominated Ottawa. Ottawa has not beaten Hamilton since 2018 now. So Hamilton has won the season series against Ottawa. That's the big consequence coming out of this game, is that if Ottawa and Hamilton end up tied at the end of the season, Hamilton's already won the season series over the Red Blacks. So that could come into play later on.
Well, that's the thing here. I mean, we talk all of this, everything you want to poo-poo, the Hamilton's quarterback situation, whatever. I mean, they're not. I mean, they're not that far out of it here in the East. It's remarkable here with the 4 teams, and we had it, Jason. If you lived through the CFL and the XFL and the USFL season, we had lots of talks about like playoffs and the teams winning divisions with losing records and all this stuff. Like, I would implore the CFL to consider that as well. Like, let's get the division winners and then let's get some other stuff in here. And I have to have a couple of 3 and 4 teams on all of that. I had a quote from Dave, which I thought was interesting. There's a stat I embedded in starting tracking this season. I call it the give back plays where a team creates a turnover and then gives the ball back before the end of the play. The Red Blacks had a critical give back tonight. Yeah, they talk about that with, they have the 5 interceptions and still not be able to do that. I mean, what do you attribute that to, Jason, to be able to have that many turnovers and still come up short?
Well, Dave is actually that plays referring to is a play that I think Hamilton turned the ball over to Ottawa, but then Ottawa fumbled it and Hamilton recovered. In the next play, Kyle Loxley gets a 75-yard touchdown on a screen pass. And that was really the difference in this game when you look at it. Hamilton got in the end zone 2 times. Ottawa didn't get in the end zone at all. And yeah, like I said, I thought Ottawa was the better team. But yeah, I think, Ottawa, a lot of missed opportunities in this one. Obviously, anytime you win the turnover battle by that much, it's disappointing not to come away with a victory. But again, like I said, I beating a dead horse here. But I think the biggest thing is that it could not punch it into the end zone. A lot of teams had that struggle this week.
I had that flash the stat at one point, but we have this. But Bo has 9 interceptions in 12 quarters of play this season. Evan, what is your thoughts seeing that stat?
Oh, I'm just gonna leave that one alone. I can't. You see, I feel too bad for Bo to be ripping on him here. Like, the guy's just. I mean, if I'm in his shoes, I'm devastated. So I'm not gonna. I mean, yeah, it's like. Well, obviously, it's not great. That goes without saying. But I mean, you can't. Yeah, like I said before, don't beat the dead horse. Don't poke the bear when it's already down or dead or whatever the case is. But yeah, I mean, I will say. Just a couple more points for me here about this game before we move on. Kyle Loxley, really cool to see him get involved kind of at receiver. It was kind of known, beforehand, even when he was with Edmonton, he was not necessarily just a dual threat quarterback, but a dual threat player, can kind of play multiple positions. In this case, had a 75-yard touchdown. And I would like to see more of that from him this season. Maybe this is a better role ultimately than a short yardage type of deal. So I would like to see him, have more opportunities like that in the receiving department. And then on the Ottawa side, yeah, so Dustin Crum reverted. I wouldn't say he was bad in this game outright. He just reverted more to what he looked like in the first 2 games. And one of them was his first start where, there was a lack in passing, but he ran, for 82 yards and was very efficient doing so. So again, extremely mobile, hasn't stopped flashing that since he's come in and replaced Jeremiah Masoli. But, Ottawa, in my opinion, should have won this game. Like this was such a winnable game for them. Again, having 5 turnovers, on your end and not being able to pull through just sucks. But it ultimately comes down to, like Jason said, 2 touchdowns versus none, right? I mean, if you're going to get in the end zone twice, it doesn't really matter if you throw 5 interceptions, because if the other team isn't getting the end zone at all, I mean, the chances of them winning the game are, still slim, regardless of, how poor you perform or whatever the case is. So it was an interesting game from that perspective, definitely an interesting result. And yeah, I didn't expect Hamilton to win, but Ottawa, didn't have the last minute heroics in them this time. And, ultimately now it's sort of like how I talked about Calgary and Saskatchewan in the West, excuse me. It's kind of like Ottawa and Hamilton in the East. It's which team is going to pull away. And right now Hamilton has the automatic advantage with the tiebreaker. That's a fascinating stat to me that Ottawa hasn't beaten Hamilton since 2018. I mean, I know Hamilton's been a pretty good team since then, and Ottawa's had their fair share of struggles, to say the least. But I mean, that's 5 years is a long time, even with that COVID year.
Jason, final thoughts on the Ticats here. How are you coping with all this?
I really don't know what to think at this point with the quarterback situation. Has just been a whole circus so far this year, and just how unfortunate it's been with the injuries. So, I mean, I'm just kind of waiting to see how Taylor Powell's second start goes next week. And then I should have some more thoughts on that then.
Well, here we go. We'll kind of put this horse to bed, or the cart. I don't even know the same. We'll put this show to bed here. We'll get out of here. Just looking forward. I think this week I have a couple emails to send here, but I have a feeling this week the show is going to be a live preview show on Thursday with a special guest. I have a wedding Friday, so that kind of gets in the way of posting some stuff then. So I think if all goes, I got to email some XFL people, but I have a feeling we'll be doing that, previewing that, because I'm very excited for this BC at Winnipeg game. I mean, clearly the game rematch, whatever of the season. Evan, you looking at the schedule here, the game that piques your interest the most?
Yeah, I mean, BC Winnipeg by a country mile. I mean, if you think about it, BC wins this game. They've already beaten Winnipeg once this season. I think Winnipeg would move to 5-3, and then BC would move to 7-1. Now you're talking about real separation. And again, I'm not saying Winnipeg isn't competitive. We've been over this. I think Winnipeg's a great team, even if it sounds like I'm always ripping on them. I just think, again, they might be a little step behind where they were, a year ago, definitely 2 years ago. And with the way the Lions are playing, that could really hurt them. And, right now I'm thinking this is, again, the West final rematch that BC is going to win. That's my prediction, and I've been sticking with that for the past couple weeks. So, looking at that game, I mean, that could tell a lot, and especially if BC wins it at Winnipeg too, I think is extremely significant. So yeah, that game, I think above all, and the fact that that's the first game, kicking off the week should be very exciting.
Jason, any thoughts on that? Any of these other games before we get out?
Yeah, so yeah, that's obviously the game of the week this week. Everybody's gonna be circling the BC Winnipeg game, but I think these other games have some intrigue to them. Ottawa, Saskatchewan, who's gonna walk away with a victory in that one? Someone's got to win. I think that if Ottawa bounces back, that will be interesting, because one trend that we're seeing in the CFL so far this season is that the East teams have been relatively competitive with the West so far this year. So it's going to be interesting to see if that continues the rest of the season. And Saskatchewan is going to be really hungry for a victory in that one after dropping a bunch of games in a row here. Montreal and Hamilton, I'll be at that game. I'm excited to see how Hamilton plays in that one after Montreal really kicked their ass the first time they played for the Ticats home opener. And then Toronto and Calgary looks like a mismatch on paper, but Calgary did beat Toronto. I think it was 31-2 last year when they played in Calgary. So, I mean, that's worth noting. I mean, McLeod Bethel-Thompson versus Jake Mayer. Now it's going to be Mayer versus Kelly, and Toronto just completely different vibe right now. But I think at the end of the day, that could be an interesting game and maybe a potential upset there.
It's funny. So last year, this time, our anniversary is August 6th. And so we went to there's like this Italian restaurant down on Alki, and they don't do reservations. So you kind of just go down there. They're like, oh, it'll be 45 minutes or an hour. And I remember watching, it was, I think it was like the BC Elks game. Evan, you were there. It was the game,
Yeah.
whatever game when you went up to BC that you were watching. And it was like Rourke just went off, and like Evan's tweeting. And I was standing there in line on our anniversary and watching the game on my phone. I don't know if Ottawa, Saskatchewan will hold quite my attention this year, but I'll PVR it or DVR here and check it out, on the CBS Sports Network if I can. But yeah, a little bit of different stakes this year for that. But I remember it was like one of the BC games of the season, and Evan was sitting there. I said, "How lucky are you that you got to go watch that live?"
Oh man, I mean, look, I've said it many times. That game that I went to last year, BC. What is it? It was BC Edmonton. Yeah.
Was it? I think it was Edmonton.
It was, no, because I remember, like Emmanuel Arsenault was coming up and like signing stuff because he was in Edmonton, obviously been in BC for many years, was coming up and talking to people. I remember that pretty well. But I also remember, like, yeah, I mean, that it was a Nathan Rourke clinic, and I went. I mean, I was sitting there like, on my phone during the game. I'm like, this has to be one of the best quarterback performances I've ever seen live at any level. Keep in mind, I've seen plenty of college football games, handful of NFL games, but that, I mean, just cleared, anything. And it's a bit crazy thinking that I saw, that Chris Jones led Edmonton team, knowing where they are now, making the wrong kinds of history. But this year I will be, I think it's not this weekend, but the weekend after, I'll be up in BC again for the Lions Stampeders game there. So excited for that. I haven't really announced that formally yet, but that'll be my other CFL, I guess, event outside of the Grey Cup this year.
Very nice. Jason, anything else from you? We'll get out of here. I appreciate everyone sticking through.
No, I think that's all that needs to be said this week.
Well, we did it. Check back, Jason. Like you said, doing some recap reaction videos, and then Jason will have his preview. And like I said, I think we'll do that. I got to figure it out, but it's a little a little slow right now in the XFL and the USFL. But that's good. No off season here, so I appreciate everyone. Like and subscribe. Get on Jason's channel. I'm sure everyone's on there as well. And we'll see you guys next time. Thanks.